So a more formal welcome, and yes, regarding the the why behind the panel, like I think our title is called Teal Journeys, Beyond Cultural Differences Across China and Europe, a fairly long title that I can't even remember. But the general idea was that, as maybe some of you heard from the earlier second panel, East meets West. I have been part of the Teal Around the World core Orga team since last year, and part of my personal passion and mission has definitely been to bring about more, not just folks from China. And I think this year I started just really crystallizing what my true passion was. It wasn't to have more diversity, as I mentioned in the earlier session. It was actually to have more inclusion, like where the diversity actually leads to something more than 1 + 1 = greater than 2, and where we start to have dialogues with each other. And that being part of my passion, I started thinking about how can we have these kind of dialogues. And given all the time zone constraints, I started thinking maybe I should be reaching out to my friends that are Chinese friends in both Europe and the US. And so Jia is one of the friends that I was very lucky to reach out to, who's actually been living in Europe for quite a long time, and very happily said yes. And also her passion, since I reached out to her, has also then led to me feeling even more inspired and excited about the conversation we're going to have today. And so that's pretty much the reason. I just felt like Teal is all about connection and learning from each other. And what better way than to have these dialogues where we can really hear our stories and not just the practices. So that's the general energy that we bring here today. So that's my part of why I'm here. Yeah. So if I may pass on to Dion.
Thank you, Bianca. I like what you said. That is it is a passion also to bring you to come here for this panel. I will also say something about me. I am Jia. This year is the 21st year I'm living in Europe. Yeah, I live between France and Italy. My husband is Italian, so I have also my stepdaughters and one step family Italian. So 20 years living in France and Italy. Today to talk about the Teal organization, Teal across the cultural difference. One side it is I come out from my comfort zone. I do the coaching, I do the intervention for the organizations, but to talk about myself, to talk about the story, not only about the customers. It is something that I don't do it very often. Why I do that? I was very touched when Bianca reached me some days ago to say, Teal around the world, if there's no Chinese people who speak out, no Asian people who speak out, where it is around the world. And that brought me also to think about some beliefs that I might have, or maybe some other people might have, why we don't speak out. Maybe we think that the Western people know better, so we are come here just to listen. It might be also, anyway, the Chinese things is so complicated. Chinese people speak with the Chinese people, and the rest of the world, European with European, American with American. So maybe in our unconscious beliefs, we separate the things. And when I heard about this vision from Bianca around Teal around the world, need also to bridge the vision between the Chinese people's vision and Asian, yeah, and also the Western. I like this vision. I say to her, I'm on board. I pass to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jia, for also briefly sharing a little bit on your background. And yet I still would like to maybe start our first, we said that we would make it more format of like kind of co-interviewing, right? And the preciousness is that there's still a lot we don't know about each other, even though we have felt that instant connection. So maybe I think in this first round, I would love to, for both of us to maybe share a little bit about our background and why we're both so passionate about being like bridges between the East and West. What is our personal background? And yeah, what is our connection with this topic? And so if I may, I will start answering the question that I just posed, and then we can maybe flow back and forth. So for me, I'm actually, if maybe some people are curious, my name's Bianca, which is actually Italian, but also my German name. And because I was actually born and grew up in Germany, and quite obviously, I'm actually of Chinese, Mandarin Chinese heritage. And but being born in Germany and Europe and actually growing up pretty much my entire childhood until I was 10. And then Tim once, like, we had a story, I think we spent about like a really long time sharing my kind of life journey. But to put things in a nutshell, I spent 2/3 of my life actually in Germany, and then some of my teenage years in China going to school. And then for college, I went to Germany, and then actually for my postgraduate studies, master's, I actually also spent a few years in the US. So there's actually a part of me that's quite influenced or even heavily influenced by American culture as well. And in between, I worked in Beijing for 4 years, and then also 1 year in Mexico, which then brought also the Latin American culture very, very close to my heart. So I'm sure you can imagine at this point, personally, I feel like I'm a global citizen, and I belong everywhere, but also in some sense, nowhere, nowhere and everywhere. And so just like everyone else, I think I'm getting to know myself more and more and finding belonging in really knowing who I really am. And that's kind of my passion and connection to this topic, because at the end of the day, yes, East and West, given my background, are both inside my body, very clearly so. But on the other hand, I feel like more and more that like actually it's just called an experience of being human. And that's what actually connects. There's way more that we share that's different, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like that because it's so hard to have sometimes real conversations. So that's actually also the topic that I'd love to explore. Also, how this whole East-West paradigm, I would say for the Teal journey, has been both a blessing and a quote unquote curse. It has brought its unique challenges, which I think all the more reason to share the gems and nuggets that came out of this unique tension and challenge. I do think that's a really valuable perspective to add to the Teal community, to look at things from the East and West, but also beyond the East and West. And that's my short introduction and why I feel so passionate about this topic today. And yeah, maybe you can share a little bit more like how your story, not the full story, the brief one, and then like
short version.
yeah, and then we dive in
Yeah.
later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was born in China, and I arrived in France when I was already 28 years old. So yeah, I came for my studies, MBA study, and since after study, I started to live in France. I have also traveled in US, in Mexico. We talk about the Latin culture. I don't feel I'm enough familiar with this part of the world, but with Europe, with France and Italy, I will say that I really feel very deeply rooted there, because it is also language that I speak. So on daily basis, I switch from English, Chinese, French, and Italian. And sometimes what make me, like yesterday, I received one Chinese delegation for an agriculture business visit with the French people. And during the same conversation, I will switch English, Chinese, or French. I was even surprised to see that for me, the three, they are at the same level. I don't see the difference. Yeah, to say that it is also to, I realize that what you said just now, one side is a global citizen, one side is nowhere. Yes, sometimes at the beginning of my stay in France, sometimes I was wondering, I'm French now, and this part what I'm talking about, or what way I say the things, I'm French or I'm Chinese. I was wondering, trying to distinguish. I think it's one way to tentative to find the root. And nowadays, I cannot even know which part it is influenced by Italian or by French or by my Chinese origin. And I can feel comfortable everywhere. As another side, I know also that I'm nowhere. That is one common sensation that brings also to some beliefs that I have. At when I was younger in my career as a trainer, I handled some topic like cross-culture difference, culture difference topics, and I try to explain to the people, Chinese like that, Italian is like that, French is like that, and now after years living and also working with this, I talk about these three people, I will say that we are not so far from each other. It's like the onion. When you see the outer layer, you might see very different. We have different eyes, different look. We have different culture. The Chinese people give the business card. I give one example very concretely from yesterday. Chinese people give the business card with two hands, very wow, with the head also lowing down, and the French people give the card like on the table. Yeah, that is just the first look. But if we go inner of the onion, I find that we are all human. We are not so far from each other. I will finish this part with the last words. Some years ago, when I started to bring the Teal organization's philosophy in China, there's in one seminar that I animated, at the end of the seminar, after 3 days, there's one Chinese guy, because it is one training we made in English with Chinese and the French people mixed. The one Chinese participant came to see me, and he said, and I worked with this French guy as my colleague since already 3 years. I always believe that I cannot communicate with him. He's French because I'm Chinese. Even we speak the same English. Well, he has his French square mind. I have my round global, like one ball mind. And what I'm really surprised these 3 days when we really talk to each other, listen to each other from the heart, from the guts. I feel he understands me. I can also understand him. This is why we couldn't understand each other. Before, it is when I speak, I can see from his face, he's preparing one answer to me. So when I see that he's preparing an answer to me, I lose also my interest to talk to him. I say, well, anyway, he will not agree. But now I can see from his face, his body language, he's really, really listening. And when I hear that, that is something I heard thousands of times in France, in Italy. So I say to myself, we are not so far from each other. We are connected on the root as a human. Okay, I stop.
Yeah, I also love how you're bringing in the subtle non-verbal ways that we connect and exchange as humans. And yeah, and just coming back to our story, and so we shared a little bit about like why we feel quite connected to this East and West, but also beyond East and West topic. And at the same time, I think it's probably also quite interesting to share why we feel connected to the Teal topic, right? So because I think that's like the second, if the cultural piece, because I actually when I was listening to you share that, I was suddenly reminded of these like workshops that I had to design when I was in Mexico for about, I think, 30 plus. So I was working at a tech company from China, actually a unicorn company in Mexico. And we we tried hiring very professional consulting firms to do diversity workshops for us, and they did exactly what you said. Yeah, like Colombia people are like this, Mexican people are like this, Chinese people are like this, but the millennials wouldn't have it, right? So in the end, I was like, you know what? Let me design maybe a unique, innovative workshop called Celebrate Diversity, and it went like people loved it, because what we actually did was we looked at, yes, the cultural upbringing being kind of the thing that really shapes us, like on the level of the roots, but then also recognizing that beyond our cultural differences, we all have our unique life experiences and values, and those are, and people that have shaped up, things that have shaped up, and how we look at life, and really what drives us, what our purpose is, right? What our values are. And on that level, it's really not that different, and people got to share diversity on that level, and that really led to people really connecting. So actually what you talked about really reminded me of the Celebrate Diversity workshop that we had in Mexico, and maybe that is a good example of like why it's actually beyond East and West, if we had to really like give our talk another title. And so maybe that connects to like, if the cultural piece is like the upbringing and the roots, but then eventually as we become adults, right, as we go through life, we start to choose our life experiences, we start to choose our path. And so I'm very curious, maybe Jia, you can start this time, what brought you to the Teal path? Like, right, like what brought you to the Teal path?
Yeah. Okay, I think it's like Steve Jobs said, connecting the dot, during the life, that when it happened, you don't know what it means. But when you look back, you see there everything makes sense. I will say that in 2002, I came to France for my MBA studies. Yeah, and at the moment, at first I studied this one. My 3 years living every day in France, I don't know how many times people come to say, well, this one it is made not so good because this is made in China. It's something that I hate to hear that. I hate. I feel shamed. Even I know that it's not me. I think that is also part of our collective belief, collective education, that we were educated as the country, it is you is a you as a country. So when I feel someone criticize China or Chinese, that I have almost like a personal affair. So I say to myself, if one day when I come back to China in 2005, I was involved in creating one company. So I become the boss. I said, okay, if I become the boss, I want this company to be respected. Surely we will work with Western people. I want it to be respected. I don't want to hear anymore the people say, oh, your service provided by Chinese, that is why it is a shit. So when my two co-founders, we are logistics service provider. So we provide the service. When my co-founders ask that, everybody in the brochure, in the catalog, they will write their company's vision, the culture, the values, and what we should invent. For us at the moment in 2005, it's just to say we need to write something in the catalog to make it beautiful. But as I have this experience in France, and it was very easy for me to come out with two words. I say, I want we are professional in my work. So the first things I came out. The second thing I say, I want to be happy in my work. I said, I worked for the others. Sometimes I'm not happy, and I feel that people treated the staff badly. I say, if one day I am the boss, I cannot make myself happy and also my employees happy. It was for to be the boss. So that is the two things. It is one other that we write down. But later I realized I really believe it. And it's something that I do it, and also I promote it. And in our company, the people also believe that. And what is interesting, some years later, when I decided to come back to live in Europe, I talked with my founder. My founder say co-founder, and he said, "Yeah, the company, it is not one baby. Maybe you are wrong. You raise this company, startup company, as one baby. The company is one pig. The pig, it means when it is fat enough, it is a moment to kill and to sell, then to eat." So he said, the things that you talk about, well, it is good on the wall, but do not take it too much serious. I was very disappointed. I left the company. I moved to Europe. I said, well, maybe China is not for that. Let's forget it. And some years later, 2013, I met a group of people, and they are naive, or let's say ochre, as me. They all believe that more human, the most human, it is most effective sustainably. And they really want to bring the human in the cost attention for the organization. And I met them, it is in one seminar, it's one training seminar for leadership. It's called the Toscane accompagnement in France. And when I met this network of the people, I realized that, wow, alone, I will be very quickly disappointed or discouraged. But when you are in connection with some people who share the same value, who share the same vision as you can be also supported, and you can go much further. That restart the fire in me to say, maybe I was not so crazy. Maybe some people also crazy, and also Steve Jobs says it's only the crazy people, few crazy people, they will really change the world. I believe that maybe something I can also be part of these crazy people changing the world. That is how I started with this one. Maybe I pass to you later. I will talk about China.
I'm very touched hearing a story, and I also love how your Teal story actually sounds like started from a very simplistic wish to be happy. If you are the founder of a company and you want your employees to be happy, right? Started just from that genuine, simple wish. And then, of course, as most people probably on this journey experience, there's a phase of doubt and maybe even dismay. But then eventually you find your tribe. That I think that very much echoes my story as well, which I'll share later. You find your tribe, and then you start realizing, oh, maybe I'm not the only one, kind of like in the song Imagine, maybe I'm not the only dreamer. And if we have enough people who dream and believe and also have the power and like faith to also act upon those beliefs, then actually we can move something, and we can build something that is mutually, not just mutually, like collectively supportive, and can create very different systems and communities. So very much resonates with your story. And so I'll share a little bit about how I came to Teal. So for me, I think it started with, I used to think, so being a German-born Chinese and being born to Chinese parents, I would say like, even though my father is actually someone who's like, he's quite an entrepreneur, quite forward-thinking, I would say. Like, for example, he's the one who decided to like very early on, like go to Germany by himself back in the 80s and do a PhD program there, right? So very, very forward thinking. But like all things considered, I think my family, there are things about my family that is a little bit typically Chinese. For example, Jia, you might recognize. So I was born in the 80s. Like we have this saying in Chinese that says like 学好数理化走遍天下都不怕, which means like good children, talented children should learn like STEM fields, right? The brighter you are, the more high potential you are, you should study like science and engineering and math. And so I wasn't exempt from that, even though personally I remember being very passionate about actually psychology and acting before I chose my major. But instead I actually chose biochemistry as my undergraduate in Munich. I mean, I loved it. I was good at it. And it wasn't until when I went to the States. So I started a PhD program in the biomedical sciences. And again, I was excelling in it. I was doing good. I was interested in the topic, but there was just this nagging feeling that I was not happy. And you can't lie to yourself whether you're happy or not. I was not happy. And so I asked myself, like, okay, why am I not happy? And then that led to actually the beginning of the soul searching and really searching for my purpose. And back in 2013, 2014, I first realized that it takes more than just being good at something and being interested in something to really be fulfilled. And for you to call it your purpose or passion, it's actually on the level of, like, for me, it was on the level of values. You need to actually be doing something that really also fulfills your values, where you get to live your values. And for me, I realized I did it actually even like a value assessment, and I realized that for me personally, and it has never changed really since, my top two values have always been help society and creativity, and staying in academia just couldn't fulfill that. And especially because I knew that I was more interested in helping society, and in a more direct way, in a way that could actually touch people's lives, as opposed to doing research in the ivory tower, so to speak. So that was the beginning of me searching for my purpose. And of course, that then led me to make a very difficult decision for a typical Chinese family, which is drop my PhD. Like, even my Chinese name, actually, Jia, you might not know this, Yin Bo-Yang, actually stands for Liu Yang 博士, overseas PhD. So it's like one of those typical stories of like your Chinese parents having like dreams for you, and then you realize, oh, that's not actually my dream. So of course I went through a whole lot of internal struggle, but then for me there was no way back. Like, I just realized if I went back, I would just get really depressed, and I have to follow my heart and intuition, even though I might not know what it is gonna look like. And what I found for myself was I was very interested in social business and social entrepreneurship, because I felt like that was a more direct way to actually impact society. And I see our friends being also very engaged by our conversation and exchanging. Yeah, and so like, I decided to move into the social business, social entrepreneurship space, which is what brought me back to China in 2015 to a very fast-growing internet Chinese tech unicorn. And those 5 years, I think, were the key 5 years that really first and foremost brought Teal to my view, but also really, I think, helped me to be shaped from inside out into someone who really firmly believed in Teal and started embodying it. Because, to be honest, Chinese tech unicorn tech companies, often they are not naturally that Teal. They maybe talk about changing the world, but they don't spend as much time talking about why are we like changing the world for the better or for worse. They usually, I feel like someone's just, let's change the world. And so for those 5 years, I really started looking at how what's missing in our modern business and organizations today actually is that more human development perspective, that helping people to not just develop the mental and physical capacities, but actually also the heart and spiritual capacities. That was also the beginning of my own spiritual awakening in 2004. Actually, just before I joined the Chinese tech company, I had my first spiritual awakening and started practicing mindfulness and meditation and everything. But when I joined the company, that was when I really started developing a more holistic sense of how we as human beings are naturally like have these physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual capacities. And most companies actually only develop the strategic side, which is the brain, and then execution, which is the body, but very rarely they develop the heart, which is the empathy, the human-centric care about your employees, your customers, and whatnot. And also, very importantly, the soul of a company, which is actually the purpose level. Otherwise, it will always end up as something on the paper. And that's when I came across Frederick Laloux's book in 2016 and started my Teal journey, I would say. And since then, I think the Teal journey has become from something that I learned about in a book into something that is now like has completely changed my life. And I think that's probably what I would love to also talk to you about, Jia, in this kind of next round of like exchange and exploration. Like, how has your life changed since you decided to join this Teal movement or like space? What are some of the things that you have experienced that you find very maybe for me, for example, I feel like ever since I embarked on this journey, I feel like a lot of life-changing moments have marked this path so far, and I know maybe many more will come. So maybe for you, like, are there a few stories that you would love to share, maybe with our like friend Teal or onward friends here today? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm touched also by your story that you made this a hard decision to drop your PhD. I think that is really not easy, and you might also disappoint your parents. And I think for the children, for the Chinese culture, to disappoint the parents, it is something very hard, yeah, to break their heart, yeah. And as meanwhile, you follow your own heart. I think for when we talk about the Teal, no matter where Chinese, French, German, Italian, and all the transformation, outside transformation, start from inside, inner transformation. What we do, I think first of all is to be aligned with ourselves. If I look at Frédéric Laloux recent last 3 years, him and his wife, Hélène, they were really engaged. They're engaged in the environment protection. I doesn't do that because this is a fancy job. It is some tendency. I think I just want to answer one inner call as he shared. He doesn't want to 30 years later, his children came to interview, Dad, what did you do? What you have done for the environment? And you knew that. Have you done something? And I think he did. He's doing what he's doing is to answer his inner call. It's same for all of us. We are responsible for our own life. Yeah. For me, it is similar to that. When I met the Toscana accompagnement that I just mentioned in 2013, I followed this 15 days training seminar. I was very excited. I said, I was not crazy, I'm not stupid. Some years ago, when I talk about profession in my work, happy in my life, it's not something I'm crazy. So it seems like I find a theoretical grounding, yeah, to back up that. And that is also the same period. There's some books that came out in the bookstore. There's a Frédéric Laloux about reinventing organization. There's also Isagues about freedom and ink, yeah. And also that some of our clients like Decathlon at the moment launch their liberation, their free up the energy movement. So I was very excited. I brought also adapted my training, leadership training. I put some elements inside. There's one day, 2015, I was in Shanghai because I give many trainings in Shanghai as that period. I met one senior coach, who is one Asian coach, and I was much senior than me. When I talked with him about my enthusiasm, passions for this movement, Teal movement, he listened quietly. At the end of, he asked me one question, just one question. He said, Jia, do you really believe you will see one liberated company before dying? Wow. The question, it was one shock to me. And I still remember in this coffee corner, he asked me the question, one side of me, I just want to answer, yes, of course. It'll be easy to say that. And also, I think it's also my temperature. If people say this is not possible, I will say, oh, let me do something. I will show you it is possible. So when he said that, I reflect a few seconds. I give back, yes, of course. But after saying that, I started to reflect. I say, okay, I will see this first. I will see the liberated company in China before dying, because I can live long enough to see that. Imagine if nothing will happen. What I will say to myself at the end of my life, I will say, pity. I didn't see it. I didn't do anything.
Mhm.
I say, maybe I will do nothing, it will happen. But in case it will not happen, will I regret that I don't do anything? And that question starts to question me, to say, so if I do something, what I can do? I started to look at what I can do. I'm living in Italy, France, so I'm not living every day in China. I say, well, what I can do for that? I started to observe what is in Europe, how the Teal movement started. I saw they do the seminar, they do the workshop conference, they also read the book. Many people that I met who are in this movement, they have read some books, they have listened to some participants some conference. So I say, maybe that is something what I can do, at least translate one book. I was very excited with my idea, so I contacted Isa Guest for the Freedom Inc. I contacted Frida Lalou about reinventing organization, and also with the reinventing organization, which has become almost one Bible now in Chinese organizations, human resource directors. And I participated in this movement. We are 36 translators. So the crowd translation is also part of the way to practice, because the last thing I want to add, it is easy to understand something with the head, but it's very hard to go down with the heart for the empathy, and also to the guts, and to be aligned. Yeah. So that is how I started.
Yeah. I think this is a really cool thing to mention, just as a very, I'm sure, fun fact for our folks from like Europe and also other places outside of China. I think it was because one fun fact actually is I read the book in 2016 when I went to a workshop called Happy Startup Summer Camp in India from a group of folks from the UK, and then they recommended the book to me, and I came back, devoured it, and for the first time I had the thought, and it wasn't even me, like my parents were like, you're so passionate about this book, have you maybe considered translating it? And that thought was like, it really resonated. And then I think about a year later I started meeting folks from those, I think 64 people you mentioned. It's like, whoa, like I was like, I missed that train. But like also just to say that what I thought was really cool is like the first Organization Evolution Forum actually launched, I think, a year later in China, after that book that was crowdsourced, translated, right? Very much in the Teal spirit. And at this point, there's been one China Evolution Forum, Organization Evolution Forum every year. And I think the last 2 years, every year, at least 400 to 500 attendees each year. So just to also give our folks from outside of China a sense that there's actually a huge community in China. And this year we have about 100 people joining. So really, I am excited about more exchange going for in the next few years. So that's just as a fun fact. And yeah, I actually saw a lot of questions on our chat window. And I will just add my part about maybe also incorporate a few questions that were already in the chat window. I saw Frank asking if we could maybe elaborate a little bit more about how this Teal journey has also been about really kind of letting go of being okay with disappointing kind of the whole like parental expectations and unique challenges that were on our path to wholeness, purpose, and self-management. I think my my share probably will at least address that a little bit. So for me, to be honest, once I started joining this whole Teal journey, and I don't think it's because it's called Teal. I think I was part of the Teal journey already when I decided to no longer do the PhD, but try to find my purpose instead. That for me is the very definition of Teal, to decide to live your true self and live your true purpose. And I would lie if I said it was an easy one. It was definitely one with many challenges, but then also every challenge that I have went through, eventually to me has felt a lot like a phoenix kind of dying and rising from the ashes again. I don't know if people resonate with that analogy. For me, it has felt a lot like that. So to share one very maybe like important one, defining one, is in those 5 years when I was in that Chinese tech unicorn. In the first 2 years, I was actually doing strategy work and doing the strategy work, doing the business side, and that's when I actually first, like I said, like first got in touch with things like human development, coaching, reinventing organizations. And the beginning was just to support myself to step more into wholeness in an environment that often was sometimes more patriarchal than I was comfortable with, because I actually am someone who's like very highly attuned and sensitive. And I saw how powerful it was to really grow from the inside out, to really gain that level of authentic confidence as well. And what I mentioned about organizations being, I think from a very Eastern perspective, too young, like too little yin, too much yang, and completely then leading to a very imbalanced state. So I really wanted to do something about it, but then it wasn't quite possible to bring about organizational change and transformation as I was hoping. So instead, 2 years later, I actually opted to take the leadership of incubating a women's leadership program at that tech company, and was actually quite revolutionary because it was 2007, 16-ish, 17, and was probably one of the first women's leadership program in China, with definitely for Chinese company and tech companies. And also, not to mention, it was a transformational women's leadership program, right? So very Teal. It was about returning to wholeness, helping people to connect to source and connecting to the purpose. And imagine having that in a very actually masculine oriented environment. And after those 2 years, I ended up realizing that I actually was only giving and giving, even though I felt very purpose aligned, but actually ended up feeling burnt out. And I was holding space for a beautiful community, and women started opening up in that corporate space, which few people could believe was actually possible, quite openly, vulnerably connecting in a very beautiful fashion, becoming a community. But I realized no one was actually holding space for me, and I just burned out after 2 years completely, like physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And I was so deep in there that I had, and hence the short 1 year in Mexico, because I needed to get away and heal myself and rejuvenate and regenerate, right? So I did that, and in that year, that's when I started realizing that I think one of my biggest transformations from those 3 years was I realized Teal journey is ending up realizing that in fully serving yourself, like from a place of love, right? Not fear-based, knowing, like really practicing self-love and self-care is actually also service to the world. And when you're truly serving the world from this center place like that, then you're actually also really the one who is probably the most luckiest, because like even I'm experiencing this year when I had decided to take on Teal around the world, China again. I was very afraid that it would be as much work as last year, because last year I also had a mini burnout. I got really sick. But then this year I set an intention and said, I'm gonna try and see if I can do it in a way that is self-loving. And once I had that intention, a lot of people started showing up, like Vicky and Sophie, for example, for this year. And these last 2 days, a lot of other people are now saying, like, we would love to help support this initiative, right? And so this year it has been way less stressful and way more actually fun, enjoyable, kind of like what you were describing, Jia. And so I realized that this Teal journey, it's so much about it is like embodying holistic love that includes yourself, that doesn't like include others, but includes yourself, right? If you are like me, a little bit, you like to be in rescuer mode, but it also doesn't like include you and then exclude others, because that's actually not what love does. It doesn't separate. It looks at how everything is connected. And so I think that was one of my most formative experiences. But then also the last few years, I think I also learned way more about how to actually, also a little bit like what Otto from Theory U likes to say, right? I heard you actually kind of referring to the mind, heart, and gut as well. Like it really is about moving from the ego consciousness to the eco consciousness. And as I'm looking on your pictures, yeah, like these beautiful trees, and I can't help but feel like how you were talking about how we're all connected at the level of the root. And I think maybe this is what the Teal journey is about, like to appreciate our difference. Like we're trees, we're bees, like Tony the bee, we're Kai the butterfly, but at the end of the day, like we are connected by life and the web of life, and by doing so, really becoming more embodied, and starting with like practicing self-love. That was actually my biggest takeaway, if I had to pick one, from my Teal journey, and that completely changed how I show up in the world. Yeah. So, and I know we have like 10 minutes. So maybe like, let's see if we have a burning question from the audience. So we didn't actually use Mentimeter because I'm not as familiar with it. So Frank, follow-up question to both of you. Do parents love you for who you are and what you do? Please ignore. Frank has a very interesting question. Maybe, I mean, like, yeah, like,
maybe
so,
I let you to
yeah.
check the questions. I just add also some few words.
Yeah.
If there's one message I want to deliver through this seminar, I will say that either the Chinese or the Western people, at least for the country that we know, I don't see one fundamental difference when we are touching the human. I give the same training, leadership training, the personal development training, communication training to the Chinese participant for the same group of company. For example, if I take the example of Decathlon, the same module we give in Italian to Italian people, French to French people, English to Indian to Mexico, and for Spanish to Spanish, and the Chinese to Chinese. I didn't customize it so much. Very often people say it's not possible. The Chinese, they're different. They have their culture. They have loves. Yes, but when you touch the human side, it's the same thing. And if we talk about business, talk about performance, I think the biggest cost, people don't see it, is a hidden cost, is a trust. The trust cost, when we don't have the trust between each other, each one will build up one barrier. With this barrier, you have a lot of hidden cost that will not show up easily. But how to reduce this? Everybody build up one buffer. You say, "Oh, I don't know if the person can do that. Let me also to run out by myself." That is a kind of buffer. It's also waste of time, waste of energy. And how to have this trust? When I mean this trust, it is something that both of you can go to the battle together. You will watch my back. I will watch your back. This kind of trust, it's not 70%. It is 100, even 120%. And for this kind of trust, you need to know each other, to have this closeness between us, to be close to each other. Each one needs to be able to share his vulnerability, to share who I am, and to show up with who I am, to remove his mask. When I talk about this is Teal. This is in either in Western or in China, doesn't change anything. But surely with a language, with a culture difference, in this case, I mean that we don't have the same habit. Yeah. And with all that, it will have a lot of occasions to create a misunderstanding. And that is also to challenge our belief. Do I believe I can trust the person in front of me. I still remember some years ago, there's one French businessman during the business lunch, and he said, Jia, I would like to ask you a question, but do not take it personally badly. I said, okay, go ahead. I said, I want to ask you one question. Do you think I can trust the Chinese people? I feel hurt at the moment. I really feel hurt, but I can understand that he's saying he made some business. He was it was a failed, and so he has this question: can I trust them? I think my answer it's not the Chinese or the French or the Italian you can trust or not. I think it's like when we say in the Teal movement, you will always have one chance to be mistrusted and also to be betrayed. This is 3% of the mistakes of the people who fail your trust. They all exist. It's like you open the window, you will have the fresh air inside. You will have also flies, mosquitoes come inside. I think that is to come back to our to the belief. I believe the people is good. I believe people is bad. Do I believe that the Teal it is something that we can improve our life? Yeah. Okay, I pass to you.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you're like closing on a vulnerability note, because I also saw Tim put in kind of both a question and I think also a really good proposal of like I would love to close with us maybe sharing our because I feel like this was also very generative dialogue between you and me, Jia, even though it looks like we're having it on behalf of like two very global citizens coming from China, but one of us living in Europe and one of us in China right now. But like, what do you think it would be your takeaway from our session today, and what would be your wish for folks who joined us today to maybe take with them? And I'll share after yours. You want me to share first? Yeah,
I let you go first then. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I was actually feeling quite a lot as you were talking just now, Jia. And for me, the feeling is that if I even though it's a little bit too early to summarize, but if I try to distill the takeaways that I've had from my past actually 33 years of living across like Asia, Europe, and also the Americas, then my personal embodied experiments definitely is that yes, our cultural upbringings, even like what Frank was talking about, our families, they do shape us, but at the end of the day, I realized they just shape the way we think. It's only on the levels of mindset and cognitive and behaviors, but it doesn't actually change like who we are on the heart and core and soul level, so to speak. On that level, we're all the same. We fear the same things. We want the same things. So, and maybe the biggest challenge that we face as humanity, I really think it's that level, like we were saying about trust, is like when we see someone who's different from us, and then that natural reaction, like, can I trust that person? Can I still be fully and wholly who I am? Because maybe I could be judged, maybe I will no longer be accepted. So in many ways, I feel like the fear to disappoint our parents is very much the same as fearing to disappoint our peers wherever we go. Like if we didn't fear, then we would just show up fully authentically and vulnerably everywhere we go, right? And so I love that you talked about this vulnerability and trust piece. And for me, it opens up the question, how can we maybe the next time, like after this conference, when we meet someone who's very different from us, which is quite similar to what Tim was sharing actually in the panel before, to actively, and then we feel like, oh, I feel like I can trust that person, because that's the first reaction we have when we see someone who's very different from us, right? To actually maybe have a conversation coming from a place of curiosity, and then to see if it is possible to actually have a conversation at a deeper level. Because so often I feel like it is that insecurity then that amplifies the fear, and then that leads to the all the things that we do that then lead to kind of hurting each other. But if we operate from a place of trusting and faith from the very beginning, maybe we can build actually very psychologically safe containers for truth to emerge and for even separation to be seen. And I think that's also very valuable for, like, if you also just look at the day and age we live in today, for starting with like maybe people so-called from the East and people so-called from the West, to start really learning from each other on that level. So that would be my takeaway. And also something I want to start doing for myself, and invite folks maybe to do with me, to really be more open with people who seem different, or yeah.
I will add just one sentence. I saw the time also over.
Yes.
I will say being to act as one colibri, one small bird, and try to stop one fire with his small back to bring the water. I think when I stay with this colibri, I just can't meet. I can influence the people around me. That is enough. And sometimes people ask me how you can influence 1 billion Chinese people. I said, I don't have this ambition. It's not me. I will do what I can do with my training, with my coaching, with Toscan. We just influence 1,000 people. Maybe 1,000 will influence 10,000, 10,000, 1 million. That's one day. I believe before ending my life, I will see the liberated company in China. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. And a lot of people are putting in their takeaways, and the general sentiment is we are all global citizens and we are all human beings. And I want to toast to that. That's really beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, everyone.